This is the Influencer Inc. podcast, where you're going to learn to build your personal brand and your career in business through social media, public speaking, writing, and PR. I'm your host, Josh Steinley. I'm here with Jonah Berger. He's a marketing professor at Wharton and the best-selling author of Contagious: Why Things Catch On and Invisible Influence, the Hidden Forces That Shape Behavior. Jonah has spent over 15 years studying how social influence works and how it drives products and ideas to catch on. He's taught Wharton's top-ranked online course, published dozens of articles in top-tier academic journals, consulted for a variety of Fortune 500 companies, and he's covered in all sorts of publications like New York Times and Harvard Business Review and everywhere else. Jonah, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Excited to do this. So we start off this interview with the same question for everybody, which is, what does the word influencer mean to you?
You know, it's an interesting question. It's clear that there's lots of influence in the world, but an influencer we usually think of as someone who has more influence than someone else. To me, though, I really like to focus on the idea of influence itself and say, well, what gives people influence? Why do some people have influence on some aspects of our lives rather than others? And how, by understanding how that influence works, can we take advantage of it to make our own personal and professional lives better?
Love it. Sounds like you've thought about this before.
You know, I've spent a lot of time thinking about influence, mainly social influence, but influence in general.
Cool. So tell us a little bit more about you. I mean, a lot of people know you from your books. They know that you're a professor, but give us a little bit more about your journey and your history and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I grew up studying the hard sciences, so math, science, computer science. I went to sort of a magnet high school, got to college, thought I wanted to be an environmental engineer, took sort of a psychology class and had my mind shifted in an interesting way. And so since then, I've always been interested in applying those rigorous tools of the hard sciences, whether it's experimentation, data analysis, and statistics, to studying these more complex social science problems, like why do some products and ideas catch on? Why does content go viral? How does influence work? And when does it attract versus repel? And so I've really enjoyed applying these rigorous tools to understand these complex social questions.
And how did you really get drawn into academia?
It's a great question. I love research. I love the questions. And honestly, you know, one day I might quit my job and do research outside of academia. It's not academia per se that I love. It's the ability to study a question in depth. I think lots of times at organizations, I work with a number of them, and many of them have questions that are interesting, but they don't always have the time to answer them. And what's nice about academia is it gives you the time and the space to rigorously address these research questions, to collect the data, to dig deep, to think complex, and to really get some interesting answers. And so that's what I love about it.
So how have you applied what you study to your own journey as a thought leader and an influencer? Because you're writing books, you do speaking, and so you must be thinking about this when you're speaking and writing. You're like, how do I actually make the stuff I study apply to what I'm doing right now?
You know, there was a piece that was written when Contagious came out. There's a piece in Fast Company. And they were saying that if the book didn't make the New York Times bestseller list, it would prove that the ideas in the book were wrong. And I was like, okay, nice challenge. I appreciate that. But I think it's, if the ideas are good, it should make them spread. And so we've thought a lot about how to make the messages in the book and the ideas that I talk about in speeches catch on and spread. Everything from how we design the book's cover. So we thought a lot about the color for Contagious, for example, the image on the front of it. If you look at Invisible Influence, it has something called a lenticular, which means that depending on the side that you look at it from, the influence either appears or disappears. And so we've really thought a lot about how to communicate ideas when working on this content, because that's really key, right? It's not the ideas that matter, it's how the audience understands those ideas. And so I spend a lot of time, whether on my own stuff or when I work with clients, thinking about how can we sell ideas more effectively and how can we help people understand them.
So when you came out with Contagious and you had these ideas and you were planning this and you're marketing the book, were there things that you planned on that worked and you're like, hey, that worked? Were there other things that you tried and you're like, dang, we thought that would work, but that kind of flopped?
There was one thing we did that I loved that worked quite well. We ended up giving out, so ideas are contagious, but so are diseases. We gave out these packs of orange tissues at my talks where we said, don't you playing on the ideas of triggers and cold and flu season. That worked really well. One thing that didn't work as well, someone read the book, hip-hop artist named Mixie and did a great idea applying the content of social currency. he came out with a $100 mixtape. So he said, usually mixtapes are sold for $5 or $10. Maybe they're given away for free. He made them $100, made it limited edition, only created a certain number of them. With them came some additional content, like a free ticket to a show. They were signed and numbered, really successful, and sold out in like an hour and a half. Jay-Z bought a bunch of them, made $100,000 doing it. I told the publisher we should do something like this. I loved the idea. I tried to get them to do it originally. They didn't want to. Then the book came out. Nipsey did it. And then I said, look, we've got to do this. And the publisher was sort of lukewarm to it. And we ended up doing it, but they didn't put really enough resource and muscle behind it to help it succeed. So the people that have bought it have loved it, but it didn't have the impact.
Uh-huh. So I'm interviewing your colleague, Adam Grant, later today, actually. You're both in academia. You're both popular authors. How is your popularity and celebrity, if I can call it that, received in the academic world?
Well, first of all, I don't think I would call myself a celebrity. I think I am a conduit of sharing academic ideas that I and others have put out there. To me, academic research is great, but it's only as good as how useful it is. And so to me, I feel like my job is a translator, how to take often sort of arcane academic concepts and make them more digestible and widely accessible. And I think in that sense, academics like that idea. Some of them are always wary that when you popularize your ideas, they're going to lose some of their truth. And so that's always, I think, a challenge. But the key, again, is if no one uses it, what's its importance? And so to me, the most important is getting the ideas out there.
Mm-hmm. So do you have any upcoming projects? You're working on more books? You're working on anything interesting in the pipeline?
Moment, we're doing a lot of research on what I'll call text as data, how we mine textual information for behavioral insight. So we're doing work predicting the success of songs based on their lyrics, the success of movies based on the script of those movies, and the text of those movies, all sort of text-based information and how we can pull insight from it to predict what succeeds and what fails.
That sounds like something that Google would be pretty interested in.
I'm actually doing some work with Google on a consulting project as we speak.
Uh-huh, cool. So this next section, this is called the Favorite Five, and this is rapid fire, just quick answers. What's one of your favorite books?
There's a great old book called The Diffusion of Innovations. It's sort of a classic in sociology. It's all about why some innovations from hybrid corn to the QWERTY keyboard diffuse and succeed. It's a great old book that's one of my favorites.
Awesome. Who's a favorite influencer of yours, somebody you look up to?
I think Dan Pink is a great guy and does a great job of really writing about interesting topics in an accessible way. He's an amazing person that influences folks all around the world and has been nice enough to share some of his time with me.
What's a favorite conference, group, or event?
Good question. I tend to go to more academic conferences for fun. I speak at other conferences, but mostly academic conferences for fun. There's something called SPSP, Society of Personality and Social Psychology. It's every year in January or February. I love going. It's a lot of fun and a lot of new ideas.
I'll tell you, you're the only person in this summit who's mentioned that one.
Okay.
What's your preferred social network?
Offline is my preferred social network. The original social network, face-to-face, is my favorite. I'm on some other social media sites, but I love face-to-face the most.
Perfect. And what's a favorite tool, hardware, software, website that you can't live without?
Oh, wow. Favorite tool. I can't say a favorite tool. I will say a tool I recently discovered that I enjoy a lot. SkipLag is a great website for getting discount airfares. Someone told me about it, and I've been using it a bunch this past week, and I love it.
Awesome. Haven't heard about that one. I'll have to check that one out. All right. So now, where's the best place for people to learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah, so a great place is just my first name, last name.com. So Jonah, Jonah, Berger, Berger.com. I'm also on Twitter, and the books are available wherever books are sold.
Perfect. So now, for those of you who are listening to this as a podcast, Jonah and I are about to do a deep dive. We're going to talk more about virality and the ideas behind Contagious and such. But to get this content, you have to go to influencesummit.co. That's where we're hosting Influence Summit 2017. But this wraps up the podcast section of things. Thanks so much, Jonah, for being on the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
That wraps things up for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening, and join us over at influencerinc.co.